Let's talk about tariffs now. And the big question is, with the deadline here, will actually we see that mini deal between India and the US, perhaps tonight. Biswajit Dhar, professor and head of the Centre for WTO Studies, is with us, and so is Anup Wadhawan, former Commerce Secretary, who's with us. Gentlemen, great to have both of you here. Thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Wadhawan, चिट्ठी मिलेगी कि deal मिलेगी is the question, if I can put it in. But what's your sense, sir? Where are we at?
That's a million dollar question.
Yeah.
So certainly, it seems from the reports one has been seeing in the press that some agreement has been worked out at the official level. It's lying on the president's table, so to say. And the reactions which have come since then seem positive. There is continued talk from the US president that a deal with India is forthcoming. So that's a good sign. And maybe there is some adjustment in that agreement that would be required, which might be worked out at the official level. So my sort of sense from whatever information is in the public domain is that things look positive, and broadly around the agreement that has been worked out at the official level, some, final initial agreement, it's called an early harvest, will be worked out. So I'm quite, positive based on what one has seen. Although, there's certain concerns, even where the US has entered into agreements, whether it's UK or China, now Vietnam, those are, not very balanced. And US interests, of course, have been taken care of, but it is debatable whether UK got what it wanted out of it or Vietnam has got what it wanted out of it. So I think it will be important to see the content of the deal. But what I understand is that Indian sensitivities on agriculture, dairy have been addressed, but then our ambitions should have been adequately addressed also. We have certain ambitions in labor-intensive products and things like that.
And we'll see.
And at the end of the deal, we'll still be facing duties on steel and aluminium, which are across the board and now amounting to 50%. Of course, I think for the UK, they have been taken off. It will be interesting to see as to what India gets out of it. Our labor-intensive interests and
we'll certainly, absolutely. And the other question is, what does this deal, in a way, not just with what we will see, but I mean, other deals, as you pointed out as well, right? The China deal, for example, there was that handshake over that weekend. But then after that, nothing, silence. Same thing with Vietnam. I mean, trade deals are not two-page documents, right? Which you announce and then that's it. So we'll have to see. But yesterday, for example, Japan, for example, got a letter. Their tariffs were bumped up from 24% to 25%. And I think both the US and Japanese representatives are on record to say that they're going to be intensifying their talks into that 1st of August deadline. So that is the other thing. Even if you get, are given an offer, this is still a time for negotiations in that sense. Mr. Dhar, your first thoughts, sir? What is likely?
No, I also think that, there could be some kind of early harvest. And, there are a lot of low-hanging fruits that can be plucked at this point. I would say that, as long as India's sensitivities, and Mr. Wadhawan was mentioning about some of these sensitivities, these are taken care of, then I think it will be possible for us to move forward. But then there is, yesterday's announcements that President Trump is going to impose 200% tariffs on pharmaceuticals. Now that's a problem area because, our pharma industry has a large footprint in the US market. The generic industry has a large footprint, and that could get affected. So I think, this copper and aluminum, copper and pharma tariffs, which have been, the speculations are that they are going to be imposed. These would be a kind of, a kind of a dampener. But I still think that there can be some possibility of an early harvest, some low-hanging fruits, as long as agriculture, dairy can be left out of the deal. it's possible to sort of do something right away.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is that, I mean, that pharma tariff that he's speaking of, 200%, I mean, it's a year down the line, and let's see, too much changes here within 24 hours. So 365 days is a very long period. Let's see what actually eventually comes out of it. But gentlemen, I just wanted to get your thoughts on, what we could be realistically looking at in terms of this mini deal or this interim deal, if it were to come through. So Mr. Wadhawan, so, what could be India's best case? That the prevailing 10% tariffs continue? And that would not have seemed so bad if it was not for this new BRICS threat. Now he's saying 10% additional tariff on BRICS. So that could mean, I mean, speaking today, so we are on 10% tariff, so 10 plus 10, 20 straight away. What India was originally handed out on 2nd April was 26%. So what would be your best guesstimate in terms of what could be a realistic interim, near-term mini deal, so to speak?
Yes, it seems that 10% is going to be the new default kind of MFN tariff which everyone will face. So I suppose if that becomes the case, then India will face 10% on most items, and things which are included in the deal. Hopefully, they'll be at a lower rate. So it's all very confusing. And, as was just mentioned, these letters also which are coming, they're open for negotiation because they are not going into effect immediately. There's a 1 month, kind of deadline, 1st August. So scope for negotiation remains. And the other thing we need to see is that the US cannot, sustain as an economy such high tariff barriers. It'll elevate costs in the US economy, it'll undermine US industry, it'll undermine the competitiveness of US businesses. So the end game cannot be that there is 10% duty on every product at a default level. So I'm a bit confused as to where this is going. It is certainly this 25% and 40% which is being imposed certainly is not the end game, because there is a notice period and it's open for negotiation, and it will be, even the other day when there was some of these duties were announced, the stock market didn't take it well. So the end game is not going to be 10% across the board. So I think somewhat confused manner and somewhat random, ununderstandable ad hoc manner, it will go ultimately to a outcome where duty levels have to be sustainable and reasonable for the US economy to function efficiently and competitively. So let's see. It's open for conjecture as to this mini deal. Are we going to get zero tariffs on the labor-intensive products? As is the normal practice in a trade deal. Trade deal is always 0 for 0. It is not 20 for 0 that you impose 20 and I give you 0. So let's see what it throws up. But the way it is going at this interim stage, I won't be surprised if there are some elements like that in our initial agreement also. But then it's all conjecture. One can't make a very reasonable guess as to what it is going to be like. But ultimately, it is in India's interest that we do get 0 for 0 on all the items which are included in the deal. And of course, some areas are sensitive to the extent India allows little bit of access on agriculture, then that has to be with protections. It can't be zero duty. There has to be some tariff rate quota. So safeguards like that. So I won't really conjecture, but all these possibilities, seem open. Let's see what happens, when it's announced.
I hope both of you will join us, later today if we do hear something in terms of the actual stuff, and then we won't have to do so much in terms of conjecture, but we'll have the details then, hopefully. Thank you very much, Mr. Wadhawan, Mr. Dhar, for joining us. Great conversation as always, and some perspective for our